At a stroke, Volkswagen's Multivan redefines what you can expect a really large people carrier to be. This 7-seat Caravelle replacement sheds its predecessor's commercial vehicle roots and is the only model in the segment not to be based on a van. Yet it's supremely spacious and flexible for families.
For a long time now, really big people carriers have really had to be based on mid-sized vans. But here's one, Volkswagen's Multivan, that isn't. Yes, even though it's called a Multivan. If you're not confused yet, you might be by the time you take on board the fact that Volkswagen has 3 models filling this space in the market. Apart from this one, an MPV version of the Transporter T6 van is still available. The Transporter Shuttle, for those wanting a basic old-school minibus. Those of a more futuristic mindset, meanwhile, can ask their dealer about the all-electric I.D Buzz, which is also roughly the same size. But we're here to talk about the Multivan, which is the replacement for the long-running Caravelle. The change of name designating both the reinvention of this model and the fact that it no longer shares its engineering with the Transporter van. Instead, this 7-seat model gets the extended version of Volkswagen's familiar MQB platform, as used by larger group SUVs like the Volkswagen Tiguan and the Skoda Kodiaq. So, in that respect, you could see it as a supersized replacement for the brand's old large MPV, the Charan. Maybe even for its mid-sized MPV model, the Touran. But it's folk who would previously have opted for that old Caravelle model who are most directly being targeted here. That was very much the definitive extra-large people carrier, the most recent instalment in over 70 years of Volkswagen brand history in this segment, stretching right back to the original air-cooled Type 2 microbus of 1950. That was the first in a whole series of versatile, multi-seated family VW vehicles known by a whole variety of names, like the Samba bus, the hippie bus from the swinging 60s, or the Combi. From 1980, 4 generations of the Transporter van-based Caravelle models delivered this concept in more car-like form. But improvements over the last decade to that vehicle's closest rival, the Mercedes V-Class, convinced Volkswagen that another big step forward was needed. Does this Multivan provide it? Well, you're going to need the industry's most comprehensive review, the Car and Driving Road Test, to find out. As reviewers, we often take it for granted that people won't want their vehicles to feel van-like. But that's not really the case here. Many customers for this Multivan will have owned its Caravelle predecessor in the past, or perhaps will have switched from its Mercedes V-Class arch-rival. And they'll very much like the high-set driving position, the measured driving manners, and the square, glassy cabin of these LCV-based designs. For these people, there'll be a bit of an adjustment to make at the wheel of a Multivan. You sit further back in a position a little less upright and bus-like. And as you pick up speed, the rattles and tremors through the body shell that you'd expect from something based on a commercial vehicle are largely absent. Plus, the steering seems more direct and bumps feel more distant. It would be easy to describe the experience as being closer to that of a large MPV like a Charan or a Galaxy, but that's not really absolutely accurate either. This Volkswagen feels just a touch too vast for that, and its driving position is that bit more commanding. So, despite the suggestions of its name, this is neither a van trying to be a car or a car trying to be a van. And after years of continually reviewing large people-carrying models falling into one or other of those categories, we find that all rather interesting. The drive system of our test car certainly isn't one you'd typically expect to find in a van, or of a Volkswagen MPV, come to that, a plug-in hybrid setup offering 218 PS from the combination of a 1.4 TSI petrol engine and an 85 kilowatt electric motor. Nor is the silence of this big Volkswagen's progress when forward motion is being sourced purely from the 13 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery, which is said to be possible when fully charged for up to 31 miles. When the transition to combustion power does come, more likely to be around the 25-mile mark, it's pleasantly seamless. Changing gear, as with all multivans, is done via a dash-mounted auto selector so small you might miss it, though with this e-hybrid model there are 6 ratios rather than the usual 7. The transmission shifts smoothly, but occasionally exhibits the usual DSG system hesitation at times when you really need it to be assertive, when trying to nip into a fleeting space on a roundabout, for instance. We're not quite sure why gear change paddles are provided, because typical customers are unlikely to ever be much interested in using them. If you did and were quick with the changes, then 62 miles an hour would theoretically be 9 seconds away from rest in this e-hybrid variant on the way to 119 miles an hour, though you wouldn't willingly want to ever try and replicate those figures, because straining the TSI engine in this manner really shows it at its worst. Anyway, if you start trying to throw this multivan about, your passengers are going to wonder if you've had too few many Red Bulls. As with other Volkswagen plug-in hybrids that use the same engine setup, various selectable settings govern the way that the e-hybrid powertrain works. The vehicle always starts off in fully electrified E mode before switching to a more normal hybrid mode that sees the electric motor and the combustion engine combining together. You've also a reserve charge level option that will allow you to save a predetermined level of battery charge until later in your trip. You don't have to have a PHEV powertrain in your multivan, of course. There are other engine choices available. If perhaps understandably you think this e-hybrid model's relatively modest 250 Nm torque figure doesn't sound a whole lot to be lugging about a family bus weighing over 2.8 tonnes, you're rightly going to be even more worried about the thought of opting for the base 1.5 TSI 150 PS petrol unit. That has just 220 Nm of grunt through the gears, and if you've decided upon multivan acquisition, we'd suggest you take great pains to avoid it. That little engine is fine in a small Volkswagen SUV, but it really feels somewhat overburdened here, unless you regularly drive this MPV unladen without any rear passengers, in which case there doesn't seem much point in choosing one in the first place. The official performance stats for this base petrol unit are 0 to 62 miles an hour in 12.2 seconds en route to 113 miles an hour. You can significantly better those by selecting the other conventional petrol unit in the range, a 2-litre TSI power plant with 204 PS, which manages 62 miles an hour in 9 seconds on the way to 124. But running one of those would involve a considerably large chunk of your annual income being directed towards your local filling station emporium. All of which may leave you minded to disregard the current zeitgeist and choose to fuel this family wagon from the black pump. Volkswagen's introduced all kinds of environmental updates to its 2-litre TDI diesel engine to calm any fears you might have on that score. And this 150 PS unit fronts up with nearly 360 Nm of grunt, nearly 50% more pulling power than this e-hybrid model, which makes a lot of difference when overtaking. You don't see that in the TDI's pointless traffic light Grand Prix performance stats, of course. 62 miles an hour in 11.6 seconds on the way to 118 miles an hour. But drive your multivan as it's intended to be driven, and you could well conclude that the diesel is the pick of the available power plants, even if you can afford the considerable premium required to acquire this PHEV version. There's no full EV variant of the sort that arch rivals Mercedes offer in this segment, by the way, because Volkswagen hopes to have covered that market off with the trendier but rather smaller I.D Buzz. In town, you might expect a vehicle of this size to be somewhat awkward to manoeuvre, but in fact it's pleasantly easy to use. The glassy cabin's excellent all-round visibility and raised driving position help with this, of course, as does the fact that this multivan isn't really quite as big as you might think it to be. This standard wheelbase version is only actually 200mm lengthier than a Passat Estate. It's a slightly different story if you go for the supersized long wheelbase model. The larger variant's extra 200mm of length might leave you poking out of standard size spaces and may require careful measurement of your garage. But at least, unlike drivers of the old Caravelle or Volkswagen's Transporter Shuttle, you won't have cold sweats when faced with roof height restrictions in multi-storey car parks, ferries and channel tunnel carriages. The top of both multivan variants sits 83mm lower than those more utilitarian Volkswagen bus models, though it's still 6mm taller than a rival Mercedes V-Class. With both multivan body styles, the flat vertical rear makes it straightforward to judge when to stop when reversing, not a decision you'll have to make if you get a version fitted with the available park assist system. In town, the relatively tight turning circle will be welcome too. Even the long wheelbase model can turn in 12.1 metres, which is 1.1 metres tighter than the old long wheelbase Caravelle. Even manoeuvring with the trailer that quite a few likely families will want to connect up to this MPV needn't be too difficult if you make sure that you tick the box for the brand's clever trailer assist system. This finds you spaces, then counter turns the wheel to ease whatever's hitched up behind you back into the right position. Braked towing capacities, by the way, are rated at 1,600 kilograms for the 1.5 TSI and E hybrid models, and 2,000 kilograms for the 2-litre TSI and 2-litre TDI variants. Unlike the old Caravelle, there's no 4Motion four-wheel drive option. You'd hope that cruising speeds would be stress-free too, which is largely the case, though the cabin can sometimes act as an echo chamber to amplify the sound of rougher surfaces, particularly if you've stuck with base trim, which does without the plusher model's extra sound insulation. You won't feel tarmac tears too keenly though. The passive suspension setup seems well judged, though if you disagree, then Volkswagen will offer you the option of its DCC or Dynamic Chassis Control Adaptive Damping System. The sport setting on that might help it speed through tighter bends, and with all multivans, body roll is claimed to be around 25% less than was the case with the old Caravelle. It's not something you're going to be minded to want to put to the test, though. Predictably, there's still a fair bit of roll if you decide to ignore both the rather anaesthetised electric steering and likely condemnation from nauseous folk at the back and try to attack the turns with too much gumption. What you will want to try, if budget permits, is the interesting array of technology on offer, virtually none of which is fitted to the base-trimmed model we're trying today. Volkswagen's Travel Assist system gets another outing here, a setup based around two key features: lane assist for lateral guidance and adaptive cruise control for longitudinal guidance. The latter incorporating the brand's predictive ACC tech, which uses the signals from the front-facing camera as well as relevant GPS and map data to slow or speed the car. If your multivan has sat-nav fitted, the predictive ACC setup's even cleverer, working together with the gearbox and the navigation system to proactively take into account local speed limit information, town boundary signs, junctions and roundabouts. You can also have the brand's clever IQ Light LED matrix headlamps, which have distinct driving modes for different driving situations like poor weather or motorway travel. There's even a function that avoids you being dazzled by the reflection from road signs. You won't be dazzled by much else about the driving experience here though, but we think you will be quietly impressed by the way this multivan goes about the business of transporting up to 7 folk comfortably between school visits, garden centre jaunts, supermarket runs and all the other necessities of a family taxi's life. Going into this test, we thought you really needed a van-based MPV to be able to do all that as easily as you can in one of these. Now, we're not so sure. Can this sleeker multivan properly assume the versatile mantle of its supremely practical Caravelle predecessor? Well, it's hard not to wonder whether the switch from a van platform to a car chassis will compromise this model in terms of overall size. Reassurance on that score, though, comes with news of the significant increase in size disguised by the less LCV-like lines. Even in this standard form, the Multivan is 69mm longer than the rather substantial old Caravelle. So if you're one of those MPV owners with a semi-permanent parking bay at the local maternity unit, that space will need to be at least 4.8 metres deep. Should you want to supersize the proposition, there's an alternative long body style, which adds a further 200mm to the length. Either way, a chrome mid-level decorative strip designates top style trim. To give you some class perspective, this standard variant is 14mm longer than a medium-length Toyota Pro-Ace Verso, while the long Multivan is 33mm longer than the shortest long-spec Mercedes V-Class. This Multivan's difference over the Caravelle, though, is a lot more than just dimensional. Helping it look less of a van is a 43mm drop in height, which at least means that Volkswagen owners in the segment need not fear low-hanging, multi-storey car parks. Other things that visually transition this model from bus to MPV include chamfered corners, short overhangs, and this prominent lower panel crease. Plus, big wheels from 16 to 17 inches. We've got 17-inch Dundrod-style silver rims here. Yet little references to the old Caravelle can be carried forward if you wish, like the two-tone paintwork that often became a signature feature of that model in the last decade on sale. You might be reminded a little of it at the rear too, where the tailgate's bluff as the Eiger, though Volkswagen has added two part LED lights and full-width glazing for the first time in this segment. From here, you better notice the 37mm increase in width over the Caravelle. And clearly, despite the boxy looks, attention's been paid to aerodynamics, hence this subtle roof spoiler with its sleek supporting pillar stays. A stainless steel trim strip designates plusher style spec, and as usual though, what's more important is what you can't see, namely the switch to a lengthened version of the MQB chassis used by big Volkswagen Group MPVs like the Volkswagen Tiguan Allspace. The front shows the Multivan at its most car-like, with a raked-back windscreen that will feel very avant-garde for folk graduating on from the Caravelle. The lower intake's made up of this hexagonal grille detailing above and below the number plate. Flanking the brand badge and its central trimming strip, meanwhile, are narrow LED headlamps that, on the Plushes variant, are upgraded to IQ Light Matrix status. But of course, what really matters is found inside. It would have been quite possible in something this big to shoehorn in 8 or 9 seats, as rival Stellantis Group models do, as indeed Volkswagen also does in the Transporter Shuttle minibus version of this design. But then that would have created a minibus feel, which is precisely what most Multivan owners won't want. In fact, some don't even want 7 seats. Pull back the sliding side door and the interior you're faced with can, if you wish, be specified with 3 pairs of individual chairs that let just 6 occupants really stretch out in corporate comfort. Assuming that you're not a CEO, though, you'll probably prefer this more conventional rear seating layout. What'll be new for folk graduating from the old Caravelle is the way that previous models' third row bench has been replaced by 3 individual chairs at the very back. They'll be less pleased, though, to find that the middle row seats no longer swivel on their bases, which means that if you want to create a mobile lounge with second row passengers politely facing those at the rear, you'll now need to decide upon the fact before setting off, then physically lift the second row chairs from their runners and turn them round. Just as well, then, that they're now 25% lighter than before, weighing no more than 29 kilograms. Once you've worked out how the detaching and attaching process works for each individual chair, you'll have plenty of options in deciding upon its placement, thanks to all the various positioning points along the rails that span the length of the cabin floor. You'll obviously have a bit more flexibility when it comes to doing that if you opt for the lengthier, long body style we mentioned earlier. Inevitably, because of the significant drop in roof height we also mentioned earlier, getting into the very rearmost row isn't quite as easy as it was in the old Caravelle, but it's far more straightforward than it would be in a conventional car-like big MPV like a Ford Galaxy, and of course vastly easier than getting into the third row of a big SUV. Pulling on this middle chair's seat shoulder catch slides it forward as the seat base simultaneously rises up, so you can push it right up to the front seat back and free up quite a wide entryway to the rearmost chairs. Once you're in place here at the very back, Volkswagen insists that headroom is exactly the same as what was previously provided in the old Caravelle. It doesn't really feel like it, perhaps because of the slightly skinnier windows, but on a multivan you can optionally add a huge 1.8 square metre two-part panoramic glass roof, which would return some of this top VW MPV's former airiness. Either way, headspace is hugely better than it would be in, say, a Galaxy or Volkswagen's old Charan. And legroom, of course, is in a different league. There aren't many ways the second row seat backs in front could be positioned so that 3 adults couldn't fit back here in reasonable comfort. All the rear chairs inside a multivan are unfortunately of the sort with headrests that uncomfortably dig into the back of your neck until you raise them, but the seat backs recline, and unlike so many 7-seat MPVs and SUVs, all 3 rear chairs back here have ISOFIX child seat fastenings. There's a cup holder and a USB-C port below each side window, and on the left side there's a shallow storage panel cubby with a 12-volt socket. There are overhead reading lights on each side. If the sliding multifunction table is pushed back towards the rear, you'll have access to the rearmost twin cup holders on that, and a surprisingly large concealed storage chamber within the device. Right, let's move to the 2 chairs in the second row. Here, the seats also recline as well as slide, but the first thing you're going to notice is this clever sliding multifunction table. Push this centre button and it rises elegantly so that you can pull out incorporated table leaves on both sides. Now, this sort of flexible feature isn't new in an MPV of this kind, but the way that here you can push this device all the way towards the dash between the 2 front seats very definitely is. There are 2 cup holders and a cubby on its leading edge, and a further cup holder and a coin tray further back. Also new for the segment is the way that the 2 outer floor rails now feature an electrical connection, which means that all the outer second and third row seats they accommodate can now be heated. It's a little disappointing, though, to find that the glazing in these sliding side doors only has an opening function if you stretch up to pricey top spec trim. And these tray tables that fold out from the front seat backs with their cup holder slots, though very welcome, feel so flimsy that anything placed on them whilst in motion might well end up on your lap. There are seat back pockets. ISOFIX child seat fastenings feature once again on all 3 chairs. There are overhead reading lights, and you also get a coat hook. Plus, the sliding doors each have spacious lower bins, both equipped with a USB port, though again they're of the USB-C sort, so you might have to fit them with an unsightly converter lead. Finally, let's leave the rear cabin and take a look up front. Now, you don't have to manually manhandle these sliding side doors. There's the option of having them electrically powered via either a key press or a wave of your foot beneath the lower sill. You climb up behind the wheel, though the commanding position isn't quite as lofty as it was in the old Caravelle or as it would be in a rival Mercedes V-Class. But the spacious feel you might be familiar with from models like those is pretty much retained, largely because the deletion of a gear stick and a manual handbrake frees up all this room between the seats, which, as we said earlier, can then, if you wish, be filled by this sliding multifunction table, which would then act as a kind of impromptu centre console. If you're upgrading from this model's predecessor, or indeed just about any other sort of converted van except the V-Class, it'll feel extremely avant-garde with twinkling screen tech and an almost total absence of brittle plastics and blanked-off switches. But luxurious? Well, not in the case of this base life-spec model, the one most customers will probably choose. There's everything you really need here, but not enough to make things feel as plush as you would hope this cabin might be, given the required asking price. Unless, of course, you've paid even more for the top style spec trim level. Choosing that priciest variant gets you niceties like suede-like art velours micro-fleece upholstery, dark wood grain optic fascia trim, a 30-colour ambient interior lighting system, Climatronic 3-zone electronic air conditioning, stainless steel pedals, and heat for the front seats, the wheel and the windscreen. Those with even deeper pockets can add full leather upholstery, ergo comfort, powered massaging front seats, and a 13-speaker, 840-watt Harman Kardon premium sound system. It'd all be nice to have, but of more importance is the news that Volkswagen's very much got the basics right. The smart, multi-function leather-stitched steering wheel is well positioned, and the tiny auto gear change tab is an easy reach from it. Better still, seat comfort is excellent. This driver's chair featuring electric lumbar adjustment, armrests on both sides, and great under-thigh support for longer trips. Sadly though, when this vehicle's stationary, you can't turn either of the front seats round to face those at the rear, as you used to be able to in some versions of the Caravelle. All-round visibility is pretty good too, your frontward view at junctions aided by the quarter-light glasswork in the A-pillars. Obviously, your over-the-shoulder vision won't be great when the rear's full of passengers, but you'll be helped by the glassy cabin and the fact that all-round parking sensors and a rear-view camera come as standard across the range. We mentioned screen tech. This being a new era Volkswagen cabin design, it features a configurable 10-inch digital cockpit instrument binnacle screen with virtual dials, adjustable via this steering wheel view button and configurable using options on the centre screen. For a wider range of customisation, you've to spend more on the alternative 10.25-inch Digital Cockpit Pro display that's fitted with style spec. You can do quite a lot with this standard screen though, which has 4 layouts, so you can flick between using this wheel-mounted view button. Most of the time, you'll probably stick with this twin virtual dial format, but there's also a full-width format for better navigation map display, and 2 less cluttered layouts, one for drive assist, function display, and the other more minimalist, centering on a digital speedo. Using these buttons on the right-hand wheel spoke, you can tailor what appears on the right-hand side of the screen with all 4 layouts. And with the virtual dial and full-width map layouts, you can tailor what appears on the left-hand side of the screen too. With the twin virtual dial layout, you can also decide what you want to view in the centre of the screen: date and time, road sign info, a digital speedo, or driving data. The glass-fronted centre dash infotainment monitor is 10 inches in size, however much you spend, and gets all the basic stuff including Volkswagen App Connect, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring. This e-hybrid model gets Alexa-enabled voice activation too. You get the usual classy Volkswagen graphics, and pressing this right-hand open square connects you through to a home screen full of the usual items. Swipe left on it and you can alternatively use 2 configurable split-screen home displays. Here we've got one showing a nav map plus vehicle, phone and audio functions, and another with phone, trip, computer and music options. Obviously, there'll be a lot more built in if you upgrade from this base Ready to Discover setup to the nav-enabled Discover Media package, which has streaming and internet access and can also be specified with gesture control. Enough with screens. Are there any cabin issues? Well, not everything's ideal, of course. Sadly, both media packages do without a physical volume controller and have ingested all of the previous climate system buttons, which means that you're reliant on these fiddly sliders below the centre screen to adjust cabin temperature and audio volume, which is awkward, not only because they were designed in the days before widespread use of hand sanitizer made this kind of feature almost untenable, but also because they don't illuminate at night. So you might find yourself having to adjust the temperature in gradual stages as you pass beneath streetlights. You might also find yourself intensely disliking the various touch-sensitive buttons on these two square black panels, one below the centre screen and the other by your right knee. They're used to control things like the driving modes and the lights, but Volkswagen hasn't built haptic response into this trendy switchgear, so sometimes you're never quite sure whether what you've requested is actually being activated. You'd hope for plenty of cabin stowage space from a large MPV, and sure enough, there are plenty of cubbies for smaller items. This lower glove box isn't very big, so it's just as well that it's accompanied by a higher set one folding out of the upper trim panel. Two cup holders flip out from the middle of the lower dash. Nearby there's a 12-volt socket and an upper ledge that would provide the surface for the wireless charging mat should you specify it. The doors have both upper and lower storage areas, the lower larger one equipped with a separate little waste bin. Volkswagen has forgotten an overhead sunglasses compartment, but you get a further lidded stowage area in the centre of the dash top and a ticket clip in the driver's sun visor. Let's finish with a look at luggage space. Now, a powered tailgate is usually pretty unnecessary on most cars, but you really need it here, so relatively heavy is this huge rear hatch. Annoying then that Volkswagen denies it to customers for base life spec, even as an option. Style spec models have this in conjunction with foot swipe operation so that you can easily activate it if you're approaching the vehicle laden down with bags. However the raising process takes place, you'll need to have left plenty of space behind the vehicle for it to happen, which could be a problem in a tight multi-storey. The various Stellantis Group big MPVs in this segment and the Mercedes V-Class all solve that issue with a separately opening rear window, but surprisingly, Volkswagen hasn't provided for that here. And once everything's raised, well, this is where a super large people carrier like this comes into its own. With a conventional car-like large MPV, if all 7 seats are occupied, it's unlikely that you'll also have enough space for everyone's luggage. With a multivan, it's different, and it's helpful here that you get this mid-level hard cover that acts as a divider, which enables you to stack things above the boot floor using the cargo area's height rather than its length. You get 2 silver floor-level tie-downs, but there's no underfloor compartments, which, with this e-hybrid variant, is particularly irksome because it means that there's nowhere to store this charging lead. But let's get to the figures. Now, the cargo capacity with all the seats in use is 469 litres with this standard model, which, to give you some perspective, is about double the amount that you get in a similar scenario with a large MPV like Volkswagen's old Charan. If you need more room than that, the multivan in long spec can swallow a 763-litre capacity with all 3 seating rows in use. Both those figures appear very impressive, but perhaps predictably, are soundly beaten by quite a few obvious van-based rivals. A Toyota ProAce Verso manages a minimum of 603 litres of boot space with all 3 seating rows in use, and with 7 people inside the admittedly much pricier van-based Mercedes V-Class, there'd be 1,030 litres of cargo room in that car's standard long form, or a gargantuan 1,410 litres without folding any seats in the V-Class's lengthiest extra long guise. Still, you have to make some sacrifices to be a bit more car-like. Volkswagen doesn't need to match these capacity figures with this multivan because it has its van-based Transporter Shuttle model for those that need ultimate cargo capacity. For most families and quite a few business users, what's on offer here, though, will be quite sufficient, particularly when seats start being moved around. If the third-row chairs aren't in use, you can free up a little extra space by pulling on the seat shoulder catches provided with the 2 outer ones and sliding them forward. Or, with all 3, you can pull on these lower mid-level black straps to fold the backrests onto their bases. You'd pull on these floor-level red straps to take the seats out completely. Once you begin taking out or folding chairs in this model, it's a bit difficult to quote specific cargo capacity figures because they'll vary endlessly, of course, depending on the seating permutations you've chosen and how far both the rearmost rows are pushed forward. With the third row removed and the second row seats positioned to give folk using them reasonable legroom, you're looking at about 1,844 litres of capacity with the standard multivan, or 2,171 litres with the long version. Take the second row out as well, and you'd have 3,672 litres with this standard model, or 4,005 in the long variant. As we said before, removing seats was easier here than it used to be with the old Caravelle because they're now lighter. We should also point out that the switch to 3 individual chairs for the third row makes a massive difference. The previous model's single bench weighed a backbreaking 90 kilos. And of course, that old bench didn't allow you to remove the seating position on just one side of the vehicle, as might be necessary if you wanted to fit in a bike or something down one side of the cabin. It would have been nice if Volkswagen had completed the versatility formula by offering the option of a fold-forward front passenger seat so that really long items like canoes could fit inside. But that's not available, so things like that will have to go on the roof. The Multivan may be relatively car-like, but that doesn't mean that Volkswagen UK dealer network of car dealers can sell it. So if you want one, you'll have to order it from your nearest Volkswagen commercial vehicle showroom. Certain VW car dealerships can place the order for you though, so to find your nearest one or locate your nearest VW Vans stockist, you'll need to go to the volkswagenvans.co.uk website. Any family customers wanting to graduate on from the company's old Charan MPV are going to need to brace themselves for quite a step up in price here. We'll quote you the launch figures we were given at the time of this test in summer 2022. There are 2 body shapes, this standard one, or for £1,350 more, the alternative long version, and 2 trim levels, this life version or plusher style. Only front-driven models are being offered, and all come with DSG auto transmission. Most prospective customers will be choosing either the 2-litre TDI 150 PS diesel, which at the time of this test was priced in the £45,000 to £56,000 bracket, or for those who've weaned themselves off the black pump and can justify a £4,000 premium over that TDI, there's the 1.4-litre e-hybrid plug-in hybrid petrol version we're trying here, which swaps the Multivan's usual 7-speed auto for an older 6-speed auto box, and at the time of this test was requiring a spend in the £50,000 to £60,000 bracket. If neither of those 2 alternatives appeal, 2 conventional non-electrified TSI petrol options are also available, though which one you get will depend on your choice of trim level. With base life trim, there's VW's usual 1.5-litre TSI 150 PS unit. Upgrade to style spec, and your conventional petrol option is instead the brand's 2-litre TSI 204 PS power plant. Let's position this multivan within Volkswagen's range for you. If you still yearn for the squarical old Caravelle, well, never fear, bus versions of the company's Transporter mid-sized van are still sold. At the time of this test, the brand was still offering its Transporter 6.1 Shuttle, basically the old Caravelle without a few of the trimmings and priced comparably to this multivan with a similar power plant and a reasonable level of interior spec. At the time of making this film, we were expecting that Transporter 6.1 Shuttle to be replaced in 2023 by a new Turkish-built 7th generation design, sharing engineering with the Ford Transit Custom. The other large people carrier the Volkswagen offers in this part of the market is the trendy I.D Buzz, but that's all electric and not quite as practical as a multivan. At the time of this test, only early versions of that model were being sold from around £57,000, but when the I.D Buzz lineup widens, we can probably expect a starting point a little lower than that, which would then see an intriguing choice for customers wanting a super large Volkswagen people carrier. This car-like multivan offering a plug-in hybrid option, the van-like Shuttle primarily a diesel, or the I.D Buzz, only full electric. All three of these models at or around the £50,000 price point. What about alternatives to a multivan from other brands? Well, finding one that directly rivals this model isn't easy. It's obviously much bigger than a conventional large MPV like Ford's Galaxy, which, by the way, at the time of this test was only available in non-plug-in hybrid form, costing around £40,000. Space-wise, a multivan is more comparable to something like a Toyota ProAce Verso, also priced from around £40,000 and only offered with a 2-litre diesel, but that's really more of a van-based model aimed at someone who'd probably otherwise choose a Transporter Shuttle. As is the Ford Tourneo Custom, another contender, only available with 2-litre diesel power, which costs from £45,000 to £50,000, but does have the advantage of being able to seat either 8 or 9. In the search for something really big, but a little more car-like, you might be aware that 3 Stellantis Group brands, Vauxhall, Citroën and Peugeot, all offer large van-based MPVs, respectively the Vivaro Life, the Space Tourer and the Traveller. But they've all now gone full electric, so now more directly take on the I.D Buzz. What we haven't yet mentioned is perhaps the competitor which you might have thought would spring most readily to mind when considering this multivan, the Mercedes V-Class. But even that apparent arch-rival is somewhat difficult to compare directly to this Volkswagen because it's basically a slightly bigger MPV, still unashamedly based on a Mercedes Vito van. Potential multivan customers considering the V-Class will need to bear in mind that the shortest version of that Mercedes, the V-Class Long, is indeed long, measuring 5,140 millimetres from nose to tail, which means that for a direct comparison, you need to be pitching it against the lengthier long version of this Volkswagen. Do that, and you'll find that a V-Class would cost you around £20,000 more than a multivan. Though for that extra spend, you would get more luggage room and third-row space. It really depends on how much of that you need. The Mercedes can also be ordered in really barge-like, extra-long form, though that, of course, would cost you even more. Right, enough with the comparisons. What we've established is that there really is nothing quite like a multivan. And if you've also come to that conclusion, then you're going to need to know just how generous Volkswagen has been with standard equipment. So, let's take a look at that now. You might well come to the conclusion that base life trim is really all you need. We've already mentioned that DSG automatic transmission is standard, and of course you get sliding doors on both sides. These access 7 movable and removable seats, arranged with 2 at the front, 2 in the middle and 3 in the back. A 6-seater format with 2 chairs in each of the 3 rows is available as a no-cost option. Life trim comes with 16-inch Sicarus alloy wheels, or these 17-inch silver Dundrod rims if you choose the e-hybrid version, plus LED illumination for the headlights and integrated fog lamps, LED tail lights, auto headlamps and wipers, all-round parking sensors, a rear-view camera, a heat and sound insulated laminated windscreen, power folding mirrors, rear privacy glass, a first aid kit and an anti-theft alarm system. Adaptive cruise control is also included, as is the brand's clever Car2X system, which communicates wirelessly with other Car2X-enabled vehicles using WLAN technology to share information and bring you immediate traffic updates. For example, if you're stuck in heavy traffic, the system uses the information it receives to detect when the end of the jam is coming up and get the car's adaptive cruise control ready. The hazard warning system also advises you of impending roadworks, accidents and emergency vehicles. Media connectivity is taken care of by a 10-inch ready-to-discover centre dash monitor, which incorporates voice activation, streaming and internet access, an 8-speaker DAB sound system and Volkswagen's App Connect setup, which allows for wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay smartphone mirroring. A pair of USB-C ports are provided in the front, with 4 more available in the passenger compartment. The e-hybrid models get voice control with the Alexa system too. What about interior equipment with life spec? Well, up front, you get armrests and electric lumbar support for the 2 lead chairs, which are trimmed in Rebella cloth upholstery. In addition, there's Volkswagen's digital cockpit instrument display screen, manual air conditioning, a leather-stitched multifunction steering wheel with gear shift paddles, a rear-view camera, an auto-dimming rear-view mirror, and a sliding centre console that retracts to the passenger compartment to form a multifunction table. If you can stretch to top style spec, you'll get quite a lot more. Style spec models are set apart by 17-inch Dundrod wheels with black diamond-turned finishing, stainless steel tailgate trim and chrome decorative strips found midway on the side and rear. Plus, there's the brand's clever IQ Light matrix headlights, which can adapt to different road conditions. With a style spec multivan, the sliding side doors get sliding windows, and there's powered side door operation too, the latter operated via the key or by foot movements, with the same true of the added powered tailgate. Plus, there's keyless entry, headlight high beam assist, a park assist system to steer you into spaces, and some extra camera safety features, which we'll brief you on in a moment. Inside with style spec, the instrument binnacle gets upgraded to Digital Cockpit Pro status, which means it uses a larger 10.25-inch screen and is more customisable. Plus, the centre infotainment display is Volkswagen's Discover Media navigation and infotainment system package, which means it gains built-in sat-nav. The upholstery gets upgraded too, with suede-like art velour, micro-fleece, and the chairs feature leather-look bolsters, plus there are decorative cabin trims in dark wood grain optic. At this level in the range, the front seats are heated, as is the steering wheel and the laminated windscreen, and there's a 30-colour ambient interior lighting system, Climatronic 3-zone electronic air conditioning with an allergen filter, extra cabin sound insulation, and stainless steel pedals. Whatever kind of multivan you ultimately decide upon, you'll benefit from Volkswagen's We Connect app, which will allow you to interact with your vehicle via your smartphone when you're away from it. You'll be able to do things like check if you've left the doors open or the lights on, and locate your multivan if you've forgotten where you parked it. Via the app, you can also check elements of vehicle status, access a vehicle health report, view driving data, make a breakdown call, and schedule servicing. Style Trim upgrades this package to We Connect Plus status, something that's optional with Life Spec, which is worth the upgrade because the We Connect Plus package gives you quite a lot more. With this, using your smartphone from wherever you are, you can lock or unlock the doors, remotely activate the horn and indicators, and get online access to a range of useful information such as traffic reports, petrol or charging station locations, and parking spots. We Connect Plus also gives you journeying traffic information, media streaming, a speed alert and internet radio. And if you loan your multivan out to someone else, it can tell you if the vehicle's left a preset area. In addition, if your multivan has sat-nav fitted, We Connect Plus can allow you to integrate online traffic information into route guidance and transfer online points of interest to the navigation system. Talking of options, let's go on to brief you on those, and we'll start with the key ones. With both trim levels, you can add DCC or dynamic chassis control, adaptive damping, with a choice of 3 settings: normal, comfort or sport. Plus, there's an extra individual mode, so you can set your own parameters. You can also combine the DCC setup with lowered suspension, though we're not really sure why you'd want to do that on an MPV. If budget permitted and we were choosing this multivan, we'd want to spoil ourselves for family trips by adding in the 13-speaker, 840-watt Harman Kardon premium sound system, which has a 16-channel digital amplifier and subwoofer. We'd suggest that parents further treat themselves to the optional Ergo Comfort seats, which feature 12-way powered adjustment, memory settings and a massage function. The optional auxiliary heater might also be a clever thing to add, which allows the cabin to be preheated remotely using the key fob. As for real luxury items, well, a big panoramic sunroof is available, and you can specify full leather upholstery in Savona leather if you want the cabin to have a properly executive feel. You might also want to add a wireless smartphone charging mat, and 90% tinted glass might suggest your occupants are worthy of attention from the paparazzi. If you've gone for plush style spec, you can add gesture control to the centre screen. If you can't decide between life and style trim, it's worth pointing out that most of the key extras fitted to style spec can be individually added onto a more affordable life model. These include the electric sliding side doors, the bigger digital Cockpit Pro instrument screen, the Discover Media navigation package, Art Velours microfleece upholstery, heated front seats, Climatronic 3-zone air conditioning, high beam assist, keyless entry, a heated windscreen, sliding windows in the sliding doors, and the Park Assist auto parking system. What about practical touches? Well, many multivan customers are going to want a tow bar. Volkswagen provides one of the electrically retractable sort, and you can embellish it with the brand's clever trailer assist system, which helps with manoeuvring trailers into awkward parking bays. A net partition is available for the boot, and mud flaps, a fire extinguisher and all-weather tyres can be specified too. Plus, you can add the usual lateral roof rails for things like ski racks, bicycle carriers and roof boxes. Don't forget to tick the box for the spare wheel and tyre, because otherwise all you'll get is a tyre repair kit. With this e-hybrid PHEV model, you're going to want the Mode 2 10-amp mains charging cable. On to aesthetics. Now, you're almost certainly going to have to pay extra for your chosen colour. The only standard shade is a rather dour, pure grey. Appallingly, even solid candy white costs extra. You're probably going to want one of the metallic finishes, or maybe the Pearl Effect deep black paintwork we have here. A trendy touch carried over from the old Caravelle is the optional availability of two-tone paintwork. There's a choice of two combinations, either upper mono silver matched with lower energetic orange, or upper deep black mixed with lower Fortana red. Either way, Volkswagen wants £2,700 for it. Various optional 17, 18 or 19-inch alloy wheel rims are available too. On to safety, an area where Volkswagen have matched and possibly even exceeded the highest class standards. Now, standard on all multivans is a front assist system that on the open road scans the road ahead as you drive for potential accident hazards, warning you if one is detected and automatically braking if necessary. You get that same kind of functionality at urban speeds too, as part of a city emergency braking system included as part of the front assist package. And this setup also includes pedestrian monitoring that specifically searches for pedestrians who might be about to step out in front of you and, if necessary, can initiate braking to avoid them. All multivans also get lane assist, which alerts you if you drift out of lane. In addition, across the range, the Wolfsburg brand has installed a clever automatic post-collision braking system that automatically brakes the vehicle down to 6 miles an hour after a collision. So if, say, someone hits you and, understandably, you go to pieces, the car will automatically sort itself out. We also applaud the standard fitment of a driver alert system that monitors your reactions for drowsiness, prompting you to stop for a restorative coffee if lethargy is detected. Plus, it's worth mentioning that all multivans also get dynamic road sign display, which pictures speed signs as you pass and displays them to you as you drive. We mentioned earlier that plusher style spec gets some extra driver assist and camera safety features. The one Volkswagen's keenest to talk about is travel assist, which facilitates level 2 automated driving, the system capable of taking over the steering, braking and acceleration of your multivan at speeds up to 130 miles an hour. The driver activates the system by pressing a separate travel assist button on the multifunction steering wheel. Style spec additional camera safety features include side assist, basically a blind spot monitor, which alerts you if you're about to dangerously pull out to overtake when there's a vehicle in your blind spot. There's also rear traffic alert, which warns you of approaching traffic when you're reversing out of a space. And at this level in the range, your multivan will also come fitted with emergency assist, which kicks in should the driver be incapacitated. The system initially reacts to driver inactivity by making a warning tone, then vibrating the wheel, and finally, if no response is received, performing a safe braking manoeuvre. Whatever trim level you choose, life or style, this Volkswagen will of course get the usual passive safety features. There are twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus also a clever centre airbag located on the edge of the backrest on the driver's side. In the event of a crash, this centre airbag deploys towards the middle of the vehicle and protects the driver and front seat passenger from colliding with each other and possibly injuring themselves. A rarity on family 7-seat MPVs and SUVs these days is to find ISOFIX child seat fastenings, not only for the two outer second-row seats, but for all second and third-row seating positions. Across the range, Volkswagen has also fitted a tyre pressure monitoring system and anti-whiplash front head restraints. On top of this, there are the usual electronic systems, ESC stability control and an ASR traction control system, plus ABS braking, of course, a hill hold assist feature that stops you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, and automatically activating hazard warning lights that advertise panic stops to following motorists. The WeConnect app also includes an eCall emergency system with automatic accident notification, which means that if the airbags go off in a collision, the emergency services will automatically be advised of your exact GPS location. And if you want to go further with safety on your multivan, Volkswagen offers its pre-crash preventative occupant protection system as an option. This senses when an impact is imminent, then braces the car to better withstand it by instantly closing the windows. You won't be expecting an MPV of this size to be particularly cheap to run, but Volkswagen hopes to surprise you here. The base 1.5 TSI petrol unit manages up to 35.3 mpg on the combined cycle. The 2-litre TDI diesel improves that to 43.5 mpg and 170 grams per kilometre, which in combination with the 58-litre fuel tank facilitates a range of around 620 miles without refuelling. For the 2-litre TSI petrol model, the figures are rather different. Bests of 31.4 mpg and 203 grams per kilometre. This plug-in e-hybrid petrol version's certainly worth a look. It theoretically offers up to 156.9 mpg on the combined cycle, that reading based around use of the normal hybrid driving mode. In reality, you're more likely to achieve returns comparable with the 2-litre diesel TDI variant, and even for that, you'll need to use the various provided drive modes proactively, and keep an eye on the various provided e-displays in the vehicle section of the centre screen. There's an electric range monitor, which also gives you your energy consumption in miles per kilowatt hour and briefs you on the amount of fully electrified mileage you've completed since the start of your journey. Alternatively, in the same section, you can view an interactive energy flow diagram, which shows at any time what's being powered by what. A data section of the vehicle screen shows you consumption and trip info since the start of your journey over the long term and since refuelling. With this e-hybrid variant, you'll also need to keep an eye on the digital cockpit instrument screen if you're to drive frugally. There's a left-hand dial that'll give you green charge and blue percentage power sections to help you drive more economically. The car will always start off in fully electrified E-mode before switching to a hybrid mode that sees the electric motor and the combustion engine combining together. On the drive mode section of the centre dash screen, you're also provided with a useful reserve charge level option that will allow you to save battery charge until later in your trip. What about emissions with the e-hybrid? Well, they're rated at a tax-busting 41 grams per kilometre of CO2, that figure based around the potential 31-mile driving range possible from the 13 kilowatt-hour battery when fully charged. Make full use of that, and it's quite likely that with a typical commute, a Multivan e-hybrid owner would only need to actually visit a fuel station every month or two. We should cover charging with this PHEV Model 2, and assuming you install a 3.6 kilowatt wall box charger in your garage, the e-hybrid model's battery can be replenished from empty in 3.5 hours. From an ordinary household socket, the charging time figure rises to around 5 hours. What about insurance groupings across the Multivan range? Well, the base 1.5 TSI petrol model rates at Group 23E. It's Group 33E for the 2-litre TSI version. The 2-litre TDI diesel rates between Group 26E and 28E. And this e-hybrid PHEV is rated between Groups 31E and 34E. Residual values are predicted to be strong, with industry experts CAP predicting that this e-hybrid variant will retain 63% of its original value after the standard 3-year or 36,000-mile ownership period. As for servicing, well, as usual with Volkswagen models, there's a choice of either fixed or flexible maintenance packages. You'll choose the fixed approach if you cover less than 10,000 miles a year, and with this, the car will typically be looked at every 12 months, with the first garage visit for an oil change at 9,300 miles, with a full inspection at 18,600 miles. If your daily commute is more than 25 miles and your Multivan will regularly be driven on longer distance journeys, you'll be able to work with a flexible regime that in the first 2 years of ownership could see you travelling up to 18,600 miles or waiting up to 24 months before a garage visit. A single inspection service every year or 18,600 miles will be required thereafter, whichever comes sooner. A vehicle status display on the centre screen briefs you on service requirements as well as oil level and tyre pressures. Finally, there's the warranty. Volkswagens of any kind are limited to 3 years of cover, but with a Volkswagen commercial vehicle, which is what the Multivan is classed as, the mileage limit in this period is raised from 60,000 to 100,000 miles. The paintwork warranty lasts for 3 years, and the Multivan is protected by a 12-year anti-corrosion body warranty. Plus, the vehicle will come with 3 years of pan-European roadside assistance that has no mileage restriction. So how ultimately ought we to define the Volkswagen Multivan? Well, you might have started off seeing it as some kind of LCV, a perfectly reasonable assumption given that it's sold through Volkswagen commercial vehicle centres, but it's got 7 seats and a big boot, so you could also think it to be some kind of minibus. Until you clamber inside and discover that those chairs slide, fold and can be rotated just like an MPV. But it's also more than that too. It's armchair-style seats and superior trim materials, making it quite upmarket for the kids and more perhaps like an executive limousine. What we know for sure is that this T7 generation big Volkswagen people carrier continues this model line's heritage of versatility, but now within a genre that's even more difficult to pin down. And in summary, well, the name is perhaps unfortunate given the switch away from commercial roots, but for us this Multivan nevertheless resets the segment standard for what a really large people carrier can be. Ride and handling are on a different level from this model's LCV-based rivals, and you get a far more car-like cabin and more up-to-date connectivity too. Boxier van-derived competitors can offer more luggage space, and you'd still consider Mercedes V-Class in this sector if luxury was everything. But the Multivan, though certainly not inexpensive, could save you so much over one of those that you might be able to justify having this Volkswagen with the plug-in hybrid powertrain that no other MPV in this segment can offer. It'll all be a different world for customers graduating on from a Caravelle, and not before time. It's long overdue for cars in this class to significantly raise their game, and that's just what's happened here.